Hello, everyone. Letting everybody get settled in here virtually. We have a few that are still connecting to audio, so let's give them a chance to get settled before we start. Great to see some familiar names and faces. Really appreciate your support throughout our events, and you're a big part of what makes these events meaningful and purposeful. So thank you all for joining. And if you're joining for the first time, welcome. Welcome to our ongoing Essential Substance Abuse Skills webinars. I think we're all settled in. Again, it's great to see everyone. Hi, Maria. John, good to see you. Aho. Yes. Let's go ahead and get started. So the sooner I get going, the sooner I can turn the floor over to our speaker today, and then we'll use our time wisely. I know we're hoping to have a little time at the end of today's lecture to field some questions. So you can either unmute or post them in the chat, and I'll do my best to try and direct those to Dr. Garcia's attention. So again, my name is Steve Steiny. I want to welcome you all to the ESAS webinar today. Today's topic is counseling families, partners, and significant others. Just have a few slides to go through, get some of this business material out of the way, and then we'll get started. Just reminding you all that this event is brought to you by the National American Indian Alaskan Native Addiction Technology Transfer Center. I am broadcasting to you from the College of Public Health here on the campus at the University of Iowa. Our center is part of a much larger national ATTC network, including 10 different regional offices throughout the country. This project is funded and supported by SAMHSA. The content is developed by the presenters, and the opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of SAMHSA, HHS, or the American Indian Alaskan Native ATTC. As most of you know, we will be following up with you after today's event. We will send out an email that may include links to the presentation slides and a recording of this event. We also have an archive on our ATTC YouTube channel that has all of our recorded events held there. And if applicable, you can also request CEUs. I believe we are offering 1.5 NADAC approved CEUs for today's event. But you should receive a follow-up email, and there'll be a link to complete a short survey. This survey is very important to our center and to our funders, and to ensure that we can continue to provide webinars like this. Your participation, of course, is voluntary, but we would really appreciate you taking just a few minutes to complete this survey. You can skip any parts that you are not comfortable answering, and I assure you that all your responses are kept confidential and cannot be linked to you or your identity in any way. But if you have questions about this, reach out to myself or to Dr. Garcia or to Ella Driscoll. Anyone at our Native Center for Behavioral Health will be happy to address any questions you may have about this survey. As you know, you're currently muted. Please use the chat box feature, and if we have an opportunity, you can certainly, we encourage you to unmute at the end of the presentation today and ask some questions directly to our presenter. I want to take a few moments, and I know we're gathered here virtually today, but I do want to take some time to acknowledge the land and to pay respect to the indigenous nations whose homelands were forcibly taken and inhabited. Please take a moment to read this land acknowledgement, which was created by 3 members of our team, Ella and Keely Driscoll and Sean Bear first. Thank you. With that, I am proud to present my friend and colleague, Dr. Avis Garcia. She is an enrolled member of the Northern Arapaho Nation and is affiliated with the Eastern Shoshone Tribe of Wyoming. She earned a doctorate in counselor education and supervision at the University of Wyoming and is also a licensed professional counselor and a licensed addiction therapist. She's practiced for many years in the mental health and substance use disorder field and has worked with Native American youth and families. She's also an advocate of education in Indian country, resource provider for promoting cultural enhancement of evidence-based practices and practice-based evidence of treatment approaches for Native American children and their families exposed to trauma. Avis Garcia has more than 19 years. Probably we're getting close to 20.
20. I can say 2 decades now.
Let's just say that. It sounds so much more impressive. 20 years of experience and is knowledgeable about the concerns of implementing and adapting evidence-based practices being introduced to Indigenous populations. Avis is currently employed now more recently with us here at the center.
Yeah.
And we are really happy to have her here broadcasting from Cheyenne, Wyoming area. So I will turn that over now, the floor over to Dr. Garcia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
I'm going to take these slides down so you can
show mine.
Put yours up there.
Okay. Does that look good?
So if you go onto Zoom and click the share screen button, we can.
Okay. Let's see.
The learning curve continues, Avis.
I am sorry. I haven't.
Now
I'm losing my slides, and then I'll hit the share screen, and I'll hit share.
There we go.
Perfect.
Hopefully this pulls them back up.
Yeah.
And here we go. Sorry, I'm learning. Sunny, stop it. Sorry, my dog barks when there's people up here. Sunny, stop it.
Looks great.
Okay. He's my watchdog. All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to be here today. And this presentation is covering, now why is this? Okay. On families, counseling families, partners, and significant others related to substance abuse. And the objectives and goals for today are to understand the characteristics and dynamics of families, couples, and significant others, be familiar with and appropriately use models of diagnosis, intervention for families, couples, and significant others, including extended kinship or tribal family structures, assist families, couples, and significant others to understand the interaction between the family system and substance use behaviors, assist families, couples, and significant others to adopt strategies and behaviors to sustain recovery and maintain healthy relationships. So we are to the concepts and foundations. Some of the key reasons to use family therapy are to build upon family strengths, improve communication, decrease conflict, reduce the impact of substance use disorder and mental health issues or significant change events within the family dynamic. And I was trying to think, is there anything else there anyone would have to add? Mainly, this is a key component to substance abuse that from a Native perspective has been very challenging in implementing in work. with Native people. What does family mean to you? In an ancestral sense, from the early 15C household recorded in English from 1540s, main modern sense of those connected by blood, whether living together or not, which was first noted in the mid 1600s, later replaced by an adjective meaning suitable for a family by 1807. From 1809, family man, one devoted to wife and children. Buzzword family values, first recorded in 1966. Group of relatives, a group of people who are closely related by birth, marriage, or adoption, people living together, a group of, and functioning as a single household, usually consisting of parents and their children. Lineage, all the people who are descended from a common ancestor. And for Natives, the family goes beyond parents and siblings. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Family therapy defined. Family therapy is often seen as a type of psychotherapy that involves all members of a nuclear family, our step family, and in some cases, members of the extended and or adopted families, such as grandparents, foster parents, or legal guardian. A therapist or a team of therapists conducts multiple sessions to help families deal with important issues that may interfere with the functioning of the family, a patient's recovery, and the level of support in the home environment. Some of the key concepts of family therapy are the whole system is more than the sum of its parts, which means rather than it's looking at the whole family and how they live together and where they live, parts of a system are interconnected. Certain rules determine the functioning of the family system. And systems are dynamic, carefully balancing continuity against change. The purpose of family therapy. Often the goal of family therapy is to help family members improve communication, solve family problems, understand and handle special family situations such as death, divorce, serious injury, substance abuse, mental illness, or adolescent issues, and create a better functioning home environment. The description of family therapy. Typically, family therapy is initiated to address a specific problem, such as an adolescent with a psychological disorder, substance abuse disorder, or adjustment to a death or significant change in the family structure in the family. Frequently, therapy sessions reveal additional problems in the family, such as communication issues. It's the common number one. In a therapy session, therapists seek to analyze the process of family interaction and communication as a whole and do not take sides with specific family members. Therapists who work as a team can model new behaviors for the family through their interactions with each other during a session. Some of the challenges to involving family in the treatment process is general resistance and unwillingness, severe deterioration of the family unit, opportunity and time to engage the family, impaired family members actively using untreated mental health issues, past abuse or domestic violence, revealing unresolved conflict, potential for harm or marked increase in conflict, lack of staff experience, and our training and other barriers that we may experience. So engaging all parts of the family can be very difficult. So it's very important to know that from my personal experience in substance abuse, this isn't done regularly because of, the number of hours that has to be completed in treatment. But the last program I worked with, once a month, we did a family day, and we had the men's and women's group separate. So of course they were separated, and we would always ask them to bring someone at least, once a month so that they could be involved in the treatment programming. And I'll talk a little bit more when we get to the cultural slides on this, but most of this comes from textbooks and really focuses on people that really do a lot of therapy. And again, this is to help people that are maybe studying to sit for the licensing exam. So this is more of a brief overview of that. And I always like to hear people's feedback if there's other information they'd like to learn about later specific to cultural issues. The foundations of counseling are the individual therapy can provide the concentrated focus to help people become more fully of themselves. Family therapy believes the dominant forces in our lives are located externally in the family. Family therapy is directed toward changing the organization of the family for the better. Some perspectives. The first one is the Bowenian perspective. It is a comprehensive view of human behavior and human problems. Focused on unresolved issues with our original families is the most important. Centered around two counterbalancing life forces, togetherness and individuality, differentiation, balanced thinking, and feeling. From the experiential perspective, designed to change families by changing family members. Families are treated as groups of individuals more than as systems. Enhanced sensitivity and expanded awareness are the essential aims of treatment. Focus on interpersonal change and a commitment to growth as opposed to problem solving. Structural family therapy is a way of looking at families. Techniques such as reframing, punctuation, unbalancing, restructuring, enactment, boundary formation, working with spontaneous interaction, intensity, and shaping competence. So some of the key concepts of this structural family therapy is that every family has structure, and which is revealed when the family is in action. Structure influences for better or worse. Families that have an open and appropriate structure recover more quickly and function better in the program. Structural approach emphasizes the family as a whole, as well as between subunits. A person's symptoms are best understood as rooted in the context of family interaction patterns. The family is seen as the patient, the whole family. The hope is through structuring or restructuring the system, all members of the family and the family itself will become stronger. Lasting change is dependent on altering the balance and alliances of the family. Subsystems are smaller systems as a whole, formed when members join together, perform various functions. The family would not function without them. Some types of subsystems would be the spousal, so that would be the husband and wife or the significant others, siblings, the parental relationship, so parents with the children. Some of the boundaries would be physical and psychological factors that separate people from one another and organize them. Types of boundaries, there's clear, bright, rigid, and diffuse. In addition to structure, subsystems, and boundaries, structural family therapy is also based on roles, rules, and power, processes and outcomes. Process of change is gradual, but already significant changes occur in the first few sessions because of a specific technique to help the family interact in new ways. And there's this overlap techniques, emphasis, action over insight, and overall structure is altered and reorganized. So that's just a little bit more on the structural family therapy. So if you would like more information on this section, if you get the slides with the notes on them, you'll be able to read more about that structural family therapy, or you can do some research on it. Google is my best friend. Okay, strategic perspective is derived from a combination of Ericksonian hypnotherapy and Batesonian cybernetics, developed a body of powerful procedures which vary in the specifics of theory and technique. Okay. Sorry, I went a little too soon. Erik Erikson broadened the development of this perspective beyond early childhood. Establishing balance between ourselves and our social world is a biosocial approach. Crisis is equivalent to a turning point, and ego developing strength and ways to deal with life tasks and personality stages. The other person worth mentioning is Gregory Bateson. From May 1904 to July 1980, was an English anthropologist, social scientist, linguist, visual anthropologist, and a cyberneticist whose work intersected with that of many other fields. He had a natural ability to recognize order and pattern in the universe. In the 1940s, he helped extend systems theory cybernetics to the social behavioral sciences and spent the last decade of his life developing a meta-science of epistemology, the investigation of what distinguishes justified belief from opinion, to bring together the various early forms of systems theory and developing in various fields of science. Cognitive behavioral therapy is where the clinician is seen as a teacher, substitute for positive controls. Family symptoms are treated as learned responses, involuntary, acquired, and reinforced. And there is also a focus on subsystems considered central to the targeted behaviors. Some current perspectives. This next one here is the solutions focused perspective. And I really like this one. This is the foundation of my counseling approach with all Native Americans. It is very simple and it's not very complicated. I also use the solution focused brief therapy. I mean, a lot of Native Americans do not want to come to therapy as a family. And if they do, even if they come as an individual, they maybe only come for a few sessions. Very rarely have I had individuals in individual therapy and working with, when I say natives, I'm mainly speaking from where I come from is the Wind River Reservation. And I always try to let people know that I'm not speaking for everybody, because what I've learned is it's a form of disrespect to other people. So when I talk, I'm mainly speaking from where I come from. So I just thought I would preface that before I go on. The solutions-focused perspective is a pragmatic minimalism with a cognitive emphasis and easily teachable techniques. De-emphasis on history and underlying pathology. Patients concentrate on solutions rather than on problems. They have little to say about how problems arise. Prefer to focus on the future. And it's not, I see it more as here and now and where are we going from here. So there's less emphasis on what's happened in the past unless we find that it's very important to a specific family issue that they want to have explored, that we don't force ourselves into those areas unless they're willing to be engaged in that. The next perspective is the narrative perspective. Again, this is another very good perspective that Native Americans have been using for years. I was thinking we have been narrative therapists and not realizing that even our elders who work with people where I come from, I mean, it's all about stories. We are storytellers, and the main thing for the narratives perspective is, you know, getting their story and changing it and making it a more positive story in the end through processing what the story reveals. So there is the personal narrative and social construction, the narrative truth versus the historical truth, and is incompatible with systems thinking and has distanced itself from the concepts and methods of traditional family therapy. And then there are the techniques. Stories and narratives have existed as long as humans have had language. They have brought meaning to the world and have allowed for history and tradition to be related through generations. How we respond to stories or narratives is the concern of narrative therapy, both the ones we create ourselves, but also those that are ascribed to by us, culture, and wider society. Through narrative therapy in collaboration with a therapist, it is suggested a person can discover and re-author their own problem-saturated stories. Okay, and when we talk about narrative therapy and how I was talking about how it relates to narrative culture, the history of Native Americans, specifically the Plains Indians and the Arapaho Indians, where I come from, was we moved all over. You know, we didn't stay in one place, and so I've come up with this. We couldn't, you know, take books with us like we can now. And so a lot of that story was passed on through oral tradition. And so a lot of teaching was through telling stories, and learning was from listening to the stories. And in the winter times was the time for telling stories. So when I think of the narrative perspective, I refer to it as storytelling. Then we have the functional perspective, concerned with the function that family behavior is designed to achieve. Assumes that most family behaviors are attempts to become more or less intimate, set up contingency management programs to help them get the kind of intimacy they want more directly, and blends strategic and behavioral therapies. The first framework of family disease perspective to arrive in the field of addictions was the disease model. This approach was a natural development from the 12 steps of AA, combined with the view that addiction is a disease. Bill W. and Dr. Bob created Alcoholics Anonymous in 1935, and Jelinek identified addiction as a chronic as well as a progressive disease, often characterized by denial in 1945. By 1951, Al-Anon was created as the second 12-step organization. Loved ones of alcoholics could attend support meetings and learn ways to stop scapegoating or blaming addicted family members for their problems. Therefore, these people in relationships with alcoholics could use the 12 steps to realize that they are powerless over the individual's alcohol use and learn to set boundaries of taking care of themselves as they detach with love. The family perspective encourages people to fight problems with medication, family support, and education, rather than to explore the network of relationships which their problems were embedded. The multi-systemic and dimensional perspective resulted out of research with difficult adolescents, a combination of techniques, actively considering and intervening into the extra-familial systems in which families are embedded. And let me see. Okay, the multidimensional family system therapy was developed by Howard Little from the University of Miami in 1985. The multidimensional family therapy is an integrated comprehensive family-centered treatment for teen drug abuse and related behavior problems. The MDFT focuses on key areas of the adolescent's life and provides effective and cost-effective treatment. Strategies and techniques for working with families, proper seating, the patient should feel supported. It should be a calm and comfortable environment. Meeting separate and then together. Rapport with the identified patient. Be prepared with an agenda, but flexible if the need arises. It is a process that allows for several sessions to reach goals and objectives. Modeling effective communication and managing conflict and negative language. Okay. Some cultural considerations that are relevant to this topic are the definition of family of origin. the birth or any family system instrumental or significant in a patient's early development. Some cultural considerations are increased immigration and contact with the global media, exposed cultures, and our own worldview is our own worldview. Healthy differences aren't necessarily problematic. Overemphasis on ethnicity can lead counselors to exaggerate the difference between themselves and their patients. And ethnicity is a powerful meaning generator. Race and ethnicity, American Indians and Native Americans and Alaska Natives. This is a chart here that goes over some of the Native American family, how it's based, and it's based on, some of it is based on traditions. And as I was looking this over, it looks at the grandparents are at the top of the tree, and coming down would be the mother and the mother's cousin, which would be their uncle. But to make a long story short, as I was going over this, it's the Native American people, from my perspective, is a lot of us tend to relate in similar ways with our grandparents are our teachers, and they often have taken an active role in taking care of the children and grandchildren in the home. And in my tribe, that is a traditional role for the grandmother to take that caretaking role on. And then we have our grandfathers, our grandparents, and we also have our aunts and uncles, so our mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters. And I'm Eastern Shoshone too on my father's side, so it's the same there. My cousins call me sister, and I call my, my cousin brother or my aunts. I lost my mother when I was very young, so I've relied a lot on my mother a great deal. I mean, my aunt as a mother, and they've been there for me all the time. And it's like, they just know that that is their job, and to be there for me. And now that I'm an auntie, I have my nieces and nephews that I consider to be my children, and they respect me in the same manner. And this is most commonly how a lot of us relate, other than we tend to adopt people from all over. I think I shared in one of my presentations that my grandmother had taught me through her life there was some family members that I thought were actually our blood relatives, but she would have adopted them for some reason. And she also taught me that your children's friends, when they come to your home, you treat them as your children, and they're supposed to make themselves at home when they come to your home. Like if they're hungry, they can get up and go get themselves something, and they just become a part of the family. And throughout the years, I've seen my grandma have several people that were adopted, or they adopted her, or even they would adopt our whole family. So that was always really cool when we met other people that came to visit. And so this diagram here is showing the 7 values of the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota life. And I am a Arapaho, but when I look at the actual values, these are real common to a lot of tribes, such as praying is a big one for where I come from. We were taught to do this when we were very young. Our elders are our greatest source of wisdom in our home and our communities, and that we have respect for one another. There you have respect for your brother and sister. You have respect for your elders. And I was also taught, there's certain behaviors between brother and sister out of respect that should not take place. So that was just some stuff that was passed on to me through my grandparents. And above all is being honest, honesty and truth. If you're not doing for things right or living right, then that creates an imbalance in our life, which can lead to further problems. And humility, caring and compassion, and generosity and helping. And That's just a basic diagram of native values are from that region. And then there's a sexual gender orientation, which is the native lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgendered, and queer is what that means. The LGBTQ population and the two-spirit. So LGBT people may create replacement family networks that are made up of individuals who are significant to them when individuals who have passed on or are no longer an immediate part of the patient's life because of addiction, HIV/AIDS, a relationship breakup, or other life events, including friends, partners, families of partners, ex-significant other, and blood relatives. Like others, for example, in cases of other cultures like gangs, family networks are built very similarly for safety and support. Some cultural considerations with the two-spirit, although not universally recognized among all tribes, may refer to the LGBTQ or other variations. And nowadays, it's I think more common. It's more accepted. And I mean, as I've have my two decades of experience, I've seen over time things changing in how we relate to people. And I've also worked with some of our two-spirit people that have come into treatment and really struggled. And a lot of them, their problems for me, I seem to see them coming from family members that didn't accept it. They weren't open to it. And so oftentimes they felt like they were shunned or disconnected from their family. And again, I've also found that if they were usually male, there was usually an aunt involved that was more supportive than their own parents. And so this is something that is, I would say, no longer a taboo topic in Native American life. And like I said, it's more accepted. I mean, even in the other world, I always refer to being on and off the reservation as like two worlds for me. So when I'm off the reservation, I refer to that as my real world. And okay, stages of family change. There is an attainment of sobriety. So the family often has to see their identified person in the family who's struggling with a substance use disorder work towards achieving sobriety. And just to achieve sobriety is hard, and it's very challenging. And I think a lot of people don't understand that it's become a big part of that person's life, and that's how they have learned to function and deal with a lot of negative behaviors, that it becomes a habit, and later it leads to addiction. And then there's the adjustment to the sobriety. So when families are working together, maybe we got our life going so long around this addiction issue that we were so used to them being drunk that we would rather they be drunk. So having the sober life just changes the whole family dynamics, especially when you look at it deeper and look at the dysfunctional family roles and seeing what role the family has and impacts that person. So it's really good if we can get the families involved and educate them to this. And I've done this by using the dysfunctional family picture of all the people in the family, and just giving everybody the handout and doing some slide presentation, which I do have. If you guys are interested, I'd be willing to share that sometime. And letting them see, do they fit into those roles? Because that's what brought me to this work. Was I had lost my mother when I was very young to alcohol and domestic violence. And my younger sister was having a very difficult time dealing with the loss. And she resorted to using alcohol at a very young age. And trying to get her some help, we ended up getting her into a residential treatment program that was off the reservation, but close to the reservation. And I hadn't even gone to college yet. And I remember they brought us all, we got to travel. I mean, the clinic gave us money to go to this special family meeting, and it was my grandma and grandpa and me. And I really learned a lot there. And my grandma openly identified as the enabler. She was able to point herself out. And I used to remind her of that later on too. And she would, check herself. And you can't always be perfect, because us grandmas, we think the world of our grandchildren. And so we tend to be enabling, and I try to be mindful of that and teaching my grandkids to be responsible and not giving them everything when they want it. So and that's what brought me to this. I attended that thing and I thought about it a lot. I didn't go right into the field, but I always say that was what interested me, was being there at that time. And it gave me an idea of how to do this when it came my time as a professional to do it. And that's exactly pretty much how I've done it and continue to do. Some family dynamics are previously referred to as codependency. Other words could be the dysfunctional family. And I always think all families are dysfunctional on some level. Like, there's no perfect family. So I tell people, don't feel offended by any of this, but it's good to really look at the roles that someone might be in. And the verb often referred to is enabling. And like I said, my grandma openly pointed out that that was her. I was surprised when she said that. Control others as they believe they are incapable of taking care of themselves, have low self-esteem and a tendency to deny their own feelings, and excessively compliant. So when I've worked with Native youth, this bottom to the second to the last bullet, I see this a lot, low self-esteem. And so I like to point that out, because we need to do whatever we can to build up our youth and believe in them and encourage them to go on in their life, and not hang on to those negative stereotypes or negative experiences they've had, and be encouraging to them, because they are our future. So I see this a lot. The head may be down. It takes them a while to really warm up. So I've often been able to do that with some snacks and some drinks. So it helps. Family dynamics continued, often react in an oversensitive manner. There's hypervigilance and a lower tolerance for stress. Remain loyal to people who do nothing to deserve their loyalty. Feel less able or powerless to influence the family dynamics. And then there's domestic violence that it plays a huge role in alcohol. And I do know a lot of the crime with alcohol involves a lot of domestic violence or other types of violence within the family, such as child abuse and child neglect and sexual abuse. So just to add to that. So if you're interested, this is a TED Radio Hour story of the why don't domestic violence victims leave. So that might be a good one to check out. I haven't looked at it, but that is an interesting issue that I also have looked at very closely. The patient lives with partner and minor children. Similar to maltreatment victims, children believe the abuse is their fault. And they need to know that it's not their fault, that dad is drinking or mom is drinking. And when they're little, they don't understand if they're doing something wrong or what could they do to change it. Being guilty and reasonable for their parents' drinking problem, trust and intimacy are child development issues. So oftentimes when there's a substance abuse going on in the family, they don't realize the impact that it's having on the children in the home. And I have a lot of times on the reservation, if they're not seeing me because they were court ordered, the Department of Family Services often referred them to us to come to treatment programming because they witnessed that there was substance being used in the home and that they wanted the family to get some counseling. And another thing that they do on our reservation that I think is really effective is when the people apply for benefits, they are given a substance abuse evaluation upfront. So that allows us to be able to screen and catch those types of issues early if there are any. The patient lives with partner and minor children continued at increased risk for mood and anxiety disorders, increased rates of divorce, violence, and the need for control in relationships. So these are the families where substance use is taking place, and maybe there's some family problems that are going on that are adding to that, which could be a family member not at risk, but actually struggling with a mood or anxiety disorder that hasn't been diagnosed yet. So you need to be mindful that a lot of people don't get help and they struggle with it for a long time, which often they find drugs or alcohol as their own self-medication practice. So once they learn about that, they can get help for that. It takes a while to convince them that it might be beneficial. The adolescent who lives within the family of origin, there could be some violent behavior going on in the family, a lot of juvenile delinquency. I worked with, when I used to volunteer, when I first went home to the reservation, I worked with juvenile delinquents. And that was where I think I've actually started doing my family therapy, because of the cultural traditions and whatnot weren't being handed down, or their parent didn't teach them. And I was taught that it was my mom's job to teach me, but because she wasn't there, my grandparents stepped up to teach me things. And so a lot of these kids from my reservation came from single parent homes. And when we did some research, we also found that a majority of the homes were single parent families. And psychiatric disorders could be occurring. And when these start to pop out, the adolescent age is right around the age where these will start showing up. You won't notice them so much when they're younger, but they're going to maybe start having some issues with that. And so it's important to check in with, the adolescents and see how they're doing and see if they need some help. There's a lot of risky sexual behavior going on with adolescents, not just in the home, but in the community. And I know that from my friends and family that live on the reservation still. And there could be some impulsivity, some neurological impairment, and some developmental impairment. So sometimes we have to take a real good look at the adolescents that we're working with and make sure we get them the proper help. I also feel that this is my favorite age to work with, because this is where we're going to make a difference. I feel like this, if we're going to do anything, prevention should take place right here, because if we don't, that's when we see them later on down the road after they've been through a rough life and they're struggling even more. Some effects of substance use disorders and family structures. The patient lives with a partner. Patient lives with a partner and minor children. The patient is part of a blended family, or there's an older patient with children, which I see quite often, and the adolescent patient and the family of origin. So like I said, when I was working with juvenile delinquents, I often had the parents just dropping the kid off and driving off if they brought them, but we had vans for transportation. So oftentimes they got picked up. But when we could get the families involved, the way we did it was using our sweat lodge, and it worked wonderfully. And now we're using equine therapy, but this COVID has really affected it a great deal. So I haven't really talked to people about how that's been going since the COVID hit, because I no longer hear or see what we were doing the last time I was there. And then there is the clinician involvement. And there are 4 levels of clinician involvement with families. So level 1 is a very minimal emphasis of family. Level 2 is to inform and advise. So we want to provide them with information. Level 3 is the feelings and support. Level 4 is brief focused intervention. So that's where that brief focused family therapy comes into play, because it comes in really handy. And like I'm going to tell you, is the brief focused interventions are some of the best to work with Native people, because like I said, most do not want to engage in therapy long term. So if we can help them deal with some issues quickly that are effective and they seem to be working well, then, I'll often tell them, if you feel like you want to come back or check in, I'm always here. Okay. Then we have the 7 C's for couples and families. So there is character features, cultural and ethnic factors, contract features, commitment, caring, communication, and conflict resolution. So these would be the core areas you would want to cover when working with couples and families. And a lot of substance abuse work that I did on the reservation often involved, when I had couples, sometimes it was both of them that were there for treatment. And then there were a few who came in and actually asked to have couples counseling. But like I said, from personal experience, they don't stay and continue that therapy. Where I got my experience with families and couples was going back to school and getting my PhD. Before that, I was probably someone who might refer someone out because I didn't feel I was really confident. But if you're under the right supervision, get some training, and you can learn to do family therapy. But a lot of substance abuse people that work there don't get that training to learn how to help families. And a lot of the work that I've done with substance abuse and families has been mainly psychoeducational. So we're just providing the family some educational information. So we're not there to provide therapy. But I worked on the Air Force Base for about maybe 3 years ago. And I had a lot of fun because almost everybody that came in came for couples or family stuff. So that's what I was doing. And I got to get a lot of experience there. The 7 C's, the first one is the character features, characteristics of a person that tend to be persistent and play a major role in defining that person. This person may be persistent in who they are and may or may not change. Comfortable with who they are, which has helped them to cope with their life. 7 C's, cultural and ethnic factors, variables that form the context in which individuals and couples exist. Surrounding cultural forces that shape relationships, which is often our Native American culture, is how we relate. We have a lot of extended family units. I mean, I know families that have one house, but all their houses are all around that house and they all eat at that one house. And I was like, this is really cool. Because I guess we were a lot like that too, but like I said, a lot of my family has been through some changes. Some contract features are a set of implicit or explicit expectations that partners have concerning how they will define their relationship and relate with one another. An effective contract is explicit, attainable, and mutually agreed upon, and is beneficial to both partners. So we may have something that they want to work on that to help change the family. We're going to agree that we're going to do these certain things in the family, such as we're going to start doing check-ins. We're going to start having family sit-down talks at least once a week. The 7 C's is commitment, pledged, devoted, or obligated to oneself, being involved with, remaining loyal to, and maintaining a relationship over time. So there are 2 types. There's stability and quality. Those relationships that may have difficulty but are stable over time, and those that have quality despite time apart for work and study and etc. So some people are busy working parents, and so it's a juggling act of being able to balance all responsibilities. The next one is caring, a person's ability to express behaviors that promote emotional and physical intimacy, expressed through affection and sexual intimacy, mutually pleasing activities, quality time together, and enjoying a supportive and understanding friendship. My next family presentation will focus on the intergenerational trauma. So when I read stuff like this, when we think about all of the substance abuse and addiction that is taking place in our tribal communities, I really have narrowed this down to from the boarding school of where my grandparents were ripped away from their parents against either party's will, and they were forced into the school. And I can go on and on about this, but if you can catch my next family session, I'll really get into where when we look at these people, we have to look at there's trauma is intergenerational and it is passed down. Like even I have identified it within myself. So, you know, our family roles, how we do child rearing, but they were beating my grandfather and my grandmother when they were in boarding school. So that's where they learned to, you know, be abusive. So it wasn't something that was commonly done in Native American culture. So I like to point that out as well. The 7 C's communication. So this includes positive daily communications, which will equal relationship success. Negative communications are characterized by expressions of negative feelings, such as anger and shame. Thus, the message is not heard by the listener. So there are ways of learning how to increase communication and improve communication. And a lot of that is done through education. Couples and families that take time to communicate with one another. Communication meets negotiations and concessions. So in the middle, so if we can learn to negotiate, you know, let's see if we can both have a win-win situation here. Couples are families that are at odds because of internal thoughts, feelings, and emotions that may or may not be true. And I know probably most of us, I don't know unless there is somebody out there who does actually do mostly couples counseling. Like I said, I've had a few, and usually those are the ones that come to the treatment groups whenever I'm providing them back home. The 7 C's, the next one is conflict resolution. And it's okay to have conflict. It's a normal thing. We have it all the time, but I always like to look at conflict as an opportunity to grow. Like what can we learn from this problem that we're having right now? So there are personal skills and interpersonal interaction patterns which promote effective decision-making. And this is an acronym called SOLVE. This is where you would want to stop, slow down, and see the problem, outline the options, look at the consequences of options, take a vote, and evaluate. So many times anger or resentment will be an obstacle, so it's important to approach conversations in a positive, calm manner. If needed, take a break to calm oneself. And in summary, taking time to think through personal relationship areas helps identify strengths to build upon and goals to strive for. Socially compatible personal values and a healthy personality, love, affection, emotional support, and balance, loyalty to the partnership with a long-term perspective, accompanied by the will to work out problems, open and effective communication, strong family traditions and compatible cultural and ethnic backgrounds, a marital contract that is flexible and a match between expectations and experiences, use of healthy and effective problem solving, anger management, and conflict resolution tools. So that 7 C's is very comprehensive in working with families. Where's that noise is coming from? Taking a hello? Taking a family history for all
I got it, Avis. I think somebody had an open mic by mistake.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
What were the rules of the family system? So this is for all the patients. Was there any history of physical, emotional, spiritual, or sexual trauma? And a lot of times this is a good thing to use the ACEs for, so that you can get people to talk about it. Where all family members expected to behave or evolve in a certain way. So a lot of families is don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel, and especially with substance abuse families. They want to keep everything secret and keep it quiet. In general, what were the family's expectations in regard to careers, relationships, appearance, status, our environment? And I like to say that, you know, our Native people, we're starting to step up now. We're getting more educated, more people are getting college degrees. The numbers are going up, so that's a really good thing. In general, was sex ever discussed? In my family, this was a taboo topic. You know, this wasn't something that was openly talked about. But yet, I'm Eastern Shoshone. And so on the Shoshone side of my family, this is not so taboo. They are a little more open. They're a little more funnier about it. And I've seen some of the elders, you know, giggle and laugh. So like I said, that's a difference I have between the two cultures that I share. The LGBTQ patients, we would ask these questions. Was anyone else in the family acknowledged as identifying as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender individual? And as I said, times have changed. I have seen people in my family more and more come out that I was like, I didn't know, but they're with people being more open and even accepting, because it doesn't matter who they are or where they come from. How did the family respond to other individuals coming out or being identified as LGBTQ? And like I shared with you, my personal experience has been they struggle with this a lot. They feel like there's something wrong with them from a very young age, but they're afraid to talk about it because they don't know how it's going to affect the family. And so they keep it to themselves for a long, long time. So I really have seen this happen a lot, and a lot of them have resorted to substance abuse and drugs without ever telling their family. And the family usually already knows. Is the patient out to his or her family? And a lot of times this is when they have the problem. And if the patient is out, what type of response did he or she receive? And like I said, those that I've encountered in treatment on the reservation where I come from, it has not been accepted. People haven't been warm to them, and this is their own family. So this is what I mean by this is really hard for them. And I think if we can work on being more supportive and understanding, and not because of these roles and rules of the family of, we don't behave that way, or, that shouldn't be in our family, and being able to accept it and identify that our times are changing, and we need to be more acceptable of other people in our family because they're just living life like we are. Guidelines for working with LGBTQ families would be to demonstrate support and understanding for the life of the partners and significant others, be sensitive to the individual's self-identification, be sensitive to the diversity and variety of relationships in the LGBTQ community, demonstrate support and understanding for the life partners and significant others, be sensitive to the individual's self-identification, and be sensitive to the diversity and variety of relationships in this community. Individual and organizational mission. Because LGBTQ communities are underserved and often invisible, it is important that treatment providers make a commitment to serving this population and incorporate the commitment to the organization's mission statement, philosophy, and service literature. Examine all aspects of program for overt and covert expressions and perceptions of heterosexual bias. Make a commitment at every level of the program, from the board of directors to the direct line of staff, to design and deliver services in a manner that is sensitive to the needs of the LGBTQ individuals. And I think this is a very good one that we should look at in our Native communities and incorporate that into our missions if we don't already have it. Okay, we have reached the end of the session we have today, and I may have gone a little fast because I didn't know if I was going to have time to get through all of the slides that we had to share today. So I thought we would open it up for some questions from our audience, our participants who are here today attending. And I don't know if there have been any questions in the chat box or not.
We've had a couple of comments.
Okay.
There was some requests to talk a little bit more about a couple of concepts.
Okay.
See if I can find those, and we certainly encourage you, if you have questions for Dr. Garcia, or for maybe a question for someone you know here that's in the audience that you wanted to get information from, you can exchange contact information in the chat. But we want to use this too as a time for you to talk to one another as well. Yes, we finished a little early, which I'd rather finish a little early than a little late. We can always use extra time. It's hard to make it up. So let me see if I can find a couple of questions though. And we may not have time to build on these too much. There was some questions about whether the slides are available, and yes, they are.
Mm-hmm.
We'll include those in PDF form when after the broadcast today. We'll email you. Let's see.
I see a statement here that someone gave, Catherine Martin. She put, one of the major reasons I was given for not providing family therapy and substance use disorder treatment is that most insurance companies will not pay for that form of counseling under the substance use disorder billing code. Huh. Yeah, I would have to know more about your billing to answer that, but I would, in where I've worked off the reservation, we've had family therapy service codes. And it's the same on the reservation too, because I have done some family therapy there. Like I said, they come for a few sessions, but I've never had them just keep coming back. Yeah, that's interesting. It must be one of the issues at your treatment center. But yeah, I would definitely look into that because most insurance companies will accept it and there's ways of working around it. So, okay.
Let's see, I saw a question here. I think you had referenced intergenerational trauma, but I think that maybe would be for another broadcast.
Yeah. I've been working with substance abuse so long, and there's one thing that just gets under my skin, and that's when people use that racial stereotype that is derogatory of the drunk Indian. And that was something when I went back to school, I wanted to really focus on and address. So instead of doing addictions work, I focused on our successful Native American men because there isn't a lot of information out there about our men. And a lot of them are struggling because our Native men in my community where I come from have over time lost their role in the family because their role was to ride horses, hunt, and keep us safe. And that was taken away from them. And so they're kind of misplaced. So now it's like, go get a job and make money and take care of your family like the non-native people do. And there's not a lot of jobs on our reservation. So it can become a hopeless situation for them where they're like, well, where am I going to get a job? You know, so some of them, it takes time to help them, you know, maybe you can talk to somebody and, you know, we've helped people get jobs and helped some of them create their own. So I really feel that the intergenerational trauma has had a huge impact on, like I said, I speak for the Arapaho tribe, mainly where I come from. And I do a presentation and which I will be doing in, I want to think if this is in a couple of weeks, next week. And not next week, but the last week of this month will be that presentation that will be Native family based. And I'll talk about this intergenerational trauma. And it does talk about how I make the connection to the substance use disorder, because, you know, when they're feeling hopeless and depressed, like even on our reservation, one of the things that I don't like is once we were able, when I was a kid, we were able to go hunt whenever we wanted to. So sometimes just for fun, it was like, let's go hunting. And now we're just like people off the reservation where there's hunting seasons and we got to get tags or a special reason needs to go on. So that's changed as well. And then, you know, there may be some men that can't have guns now. So there, a lot of our culture has been affected by that intergenerational trauma. So like I said, that's a whole nother presentation, which I'll be doing in a few weeks if you're interested in watching that. I'm just going through the comments that are here.
There was another one, Hector Reyes had asked in the chat about maybe circling back to talk a little bit about
the brief
solution-focused therapy intervention.
Yeah. Again, that's a whole nother presentation, which I could do if you guys were interested in it. I also do a presentation that is how counseling Native Americans from what I've learned over the years of my work and what I've found to be effective in working with them. And this brief solution-focused intervention has been what I use all the time. Like I say, I use it even when I'm off the reservation because it's just my go-to. And that is how you work with your clients. And so it's finding what's comfortable when you interact with your clients and doing your individual counseling, your group therapy. And so it's looking at the whatever issue they might be having and asking them, you know, how is it a problem? Why is it a problem? And they have the magic question of, I have a little wand that has glitter and stuff in it. And I'll be like, if this magic wand were real and I could do some magic and then your problem was solved, or maybe you went to sleep and your problem got solved while you were sleeping, and then you wake up and the problem is gone. What does that look like? What does that look like for you? And how who would notice that? Who would be able to tell that there was a change in your behavior or that this problem has gotten better? And sometimes once they see that that's the ideal situation that they really want to achieve, so then it's like, let's look at some ways of how we might be able to change this situation for you. And it may be looking at what have you tried already, and then maybe making some suggestions that they might want to try. And I also use the scale in my solution focused treatment, because I always tell them I'm a goal oriented person. So when we do work, we're going to make progress, and this is how we're going to measure that we're making progress. So whatever the issue is that they're struggling with, maybe they need to get a job. So on a scale of 0 to 10, where are you in looking for a job? Or, you know, what are you doing? Are you like, on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 would be you're successfully employed and you already have a job, and 0 would be like, I haven't done nothing, and we're somewhere in the middle. I'm starting to fill out applications and I'm asking people. So just making those goals for them. And so I always tie that intervention to exactly what I'm working on with that person. And sometimes I do it quickly in groups because questions might come up and they'll have questions about, well, what about this? Or they might be more open. And one of the favorite places I like working, it's not even my tribal recovery program. It is it's the Eastern Shoshone Recovery Program. Very culturally, I would say, comfortable environment to where these Native clients are really open and sharing a lot about what's going on in their life. And some of them might not talk, but the moment I get up to end my session and pick up my things, there's always 1 or 2 people that want to talk. So they weren't open in that group. So I've learned that I can't just pick up my stuff and go, that I kind of need to hang around because they were too scared to talk in front of the other people. So I'm always happy to take their questions. And sometimes they end up coming to see me for counseling because they want to talk some more. And so that brief solution focus is, again, you could do some Googling on it. I could do a presentation on it if you guys would like, because I have some handouts that goes along with it that I wish I had right now that you asked about that. Okay, thanks for your feedback. That helps me. I'm open to doing things specifically upon request. So I like to do this kind of thing. So we can do that one. And then maybe I'm thinking, And I've actually been asked to do some of this recently. So I'll if you guys, like I said, the last week of this month, I'm going to do the one that I do on intergenerational trauma and how I see that tied to substance abuse issues in our tribal communities. Okay, cool. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, there's quite a bit out there on the brief solution focus.
Oh yeah, they tie it to groups and
yeah,
all kinds of stuff, and I like it. It's really easy.
I know when I was trained to use this particular approach, we weren't allowed to even use the word problem. We had to say issue or concern. So they were very, very regimented in how you addressed issues that the patient had, and it's really empowering. And Berg and Deshays are behind this. This was developed in the 80s, and so it's relatively new, but it pulls from MI, it pulls from cognitive behavioral approaches, and it fits well if you have limited time with patients, which most of us, do. You might be lucky. You might be lucky to see a patient, maybe 3 or 4 times.
I like I said, from my experience, my native population that I've worked with, some of them might start and then they might not come back. So that's why I go right to that, because I'm like, maybe I can teach them something that they can take with them when they leave, and they got what they wanted when they came. So it's very helpful to use it. I find that it's very receptive by native clients that I've worked with.
Thank you. We had a question about CEUs, and Hector, we'll reach out to you guys via email. And at that point, if you're requesting CEUs, just make the request and we'll get that back to one of our graduate students, and we'll make sure you get a certificate of completion with the CEUs attached to that.
Okay, thank you guys for taking time to, oh wait, somebody said they wanted to learn of the brief marijuana intervention counseling. Oh yeah, this is a whole, wow. Yeah, since personal use of marijuana is legal in California. Wow, okay, yeah, I actually had.
Is that like a harm reduction plan, or is that like a use in moderation? I've not heard of that, Zona, so I appreciate you putting that out there.
Yeah, that's a whole unique thing, because I live next door to Colorado and marijuana is legal for recreational use. My dog's caught up in my earphones here. And just because it's legal doesn't mean it's legal for anyone under the age of 21. And here in Wyoming, we are dealing with huge problems here in Cheyenne, because it's 30 minutes to the Colorado border. And the marijuana use, it's like nothing you can even imagine. But as far as treating it, most of where I've dealt with it has been on the high school level, because I supervised some high school counselors under my program. And there is like a lot of marijuana use that is this vape marijuana. And then they have all different kinds of marijuana, but these kids find some very sneaky ways to get that vaping. And it could be in this pen right here, and you won't even know it, because that's how smart these kids are. Yes, you can believe some of the things that my counselors have brought to us to share what they find, so that other people are aware of, you might want to look for these things. Yeah, because we tell them, it's legal in Colorado and it's not here. And it's those that actually want treatment. And I have had a few recently actually come in and say, I want to try to stop smoking marijuana. I can't stop smoking marijuana. And so I'm always glad for those that actually come and are open. And this has been just the marijuana users that have come and asked for treatment because they are tired. They just don't want to do it anymore. But it'd be interesting to look at that. But there is a book that I have used with adolescents that is a good educational curriculum, and it's free from SAMHSA, and it is doing counseling for marijuana stuff. Is there anything else there? Okay, that's the last one I saw, I think. Okay. Is the old people in Washington and
We are approaching the bottom of the hour.
okay. Okay.
I know the cannabis issue, we could probably spend an entire webinar talking about. I'm just now looking through the SAMHSA websites. There may be, I think Zona said there may be some resources there worth exploring on that particular
Yeah,
treatment modality.
yes, yeah. She says that somebody here named Zona says dispensaries are opening up all over California.
Yeah.
Yep, they're all over now. And I think, well, our reservation is looking at some not doing selling marijuana, but using it for products, and you know how they have these CBD oils and lotions and all of that. So that's what they were looking at. But I think our young people are thinking we're talking about legalizing marijuana on the reservation, although the federal law on our reservation, they don't prosecute marijuana as heavily as they used to. And so that's something that I've seen change.
Are you, and I think Avis, somebody was asking about the adolescent treatment. Was that the cannabis youth study, the approach that you were talking about?
It is a free manual. I mean, I'm always looking for resources. So SAMHSA is a really good website for lots of free. They have these tips and taps that I use a lot for some of the presentations that I do specific to substance abuse. And they have one that is specific to adolescent cannabis treatment. And I've actually kind of taken and made my own variation to apply to adults, but we haven't done any specific I haven't done any specific presentations on this. And so I would find it interesting to do the research on this with, and a lot of tribes are opening their own dispensaries. I know Nevada has a few tribes there that have opened their own cannabis dispensaries.
I know the cannabis youth study is connected to the motivational enhancement. So I can post a link on that text too, if anyone's interested.
Okay.
Well, this has been great. I really appreciate everyone. If you do have an opportunity to complete that survey before you log off today, if not, we'll reach out to you with another opportunity to do that. It just takes a few minutes, and it will. I'm going to post that cannabis youth treatment link, the CYT curriculum. It's worth looking at if you're working with that population. But I certainly want to thank Dr. Garcia for spending this last hour or so with us. And I really appreciate everyone being here today and being part of this discussion and giving us some of your time. So it's great to see some familiar faces. I do see David Natsaway, who is one of our advisory council members. I want to give Dave a shout and give him a thumbs up. Hopefully you're umpiring some games, Dave, again. Yes, I'm still looking forward to your strike three call, so we'll see. Thank you, everyone. Until we meet again, please stay safe, stay healthy, and stay connected. We'll broadcast the next ESAS. I think it is the second Wednesday of our first Wednesday of every month. So we'll have another broadcast in June. And we'll see you then. I can't believe it's already June.
I know, right?
Until then, again, thank you, Avis, for sharing this information with us. And everybody stay safe and take care until next time.